Can you hear me? Okay, I can't hear you. Okay, can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? There, how's that? Can you guys?
Gotcha.
Okay. And Connie, I think on your phone there's a echo.
I'm not speaking. I'm on my computer.
Yeah, no, all right. I guess that makes it easy. When I hear,
You're saying there's an echo from me?
when I speak, I hear my own voice. A half a second later, that sounds like it's coming through yours, but that may be my problem.
Do you want me to mute myself?
Can you just for a second? Let me persist.
Yeah.
All right. Is there an echo there? No, the echo's gone. Yeah, it's weird. It's coming through yours, but I'll mute when I'm not speaking, so we can avoid that. Thanks.
Do you want me to try using my phone instead of my computer?
No, it's no big deal. You know, you and I will both mute when we're speaking. We'll be fine.
It's 7:00. Yeah, I'm gonna call the meeting to order. I'm gonna call the Columbia Planning Commission meeting. That's fine.
Let me see if I can.
If you mute, honey, are you muted?
I just muted her.
Okay, so it was on that engine. So Connie, we'll keep a handle on you muting, for most of the time, except when it's your time to, meet with us. So I'll call the meeting to order. Let's see, who do we have? We have typically, let me just say for the record, welcome Mary Kay Hyman. Correct?
Thank you, yes.
So our new board clerk, I'm excited to have her. And slow us down if you need us to. And usually I get help with who the alternates are. I never keep track of that really well, but do we have Don?
Don's an alternate,
Yeah, Don's an alternate, Ed, you're an alternate. So we'll seat you for Rich Napolitano, and who else is missing? Vera is missing. And Vera Engler is missing, okay. John, any changes to the agenda?
I have no changes.
Okay. The minutes of July 10th, 2023. I've taken a look at them and they look accurate. I have no corrections. Anyone have any comments or corrections? Well done. Okay, I'll make a motion. We accept the minutes as presented. I'll second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Do we have any commission members? Abstain. Yeah, was not present. Bob Powell abstained as he wasn't at the meeting. Do we have any commission members in via Zoom? Okay.
No.
Okay. The audience of citizens, is there anything anyone would like to bring up to us that isn't already on the agenda? Okay. John, any unfinished business? Nothing on the agenda.
No,
Okay. New business. We were gonna speak with Connie Kislik, our zoning enforcement officer. Connie, why don't you unmute, and John, maybe if you mute that. So Connie, looking at the zoning enforcement report, I had a positive comment about the level of detail, and this is somewhat of what we're looking for. Is there any way? Yeah, Connie, so it's hard for you to talk, that might be helpful. So that being said, we have been looking for an update on enforcement issues. And I would ask commission members to look at the list and formulate any questions about specific issues here, but the most important purpose is for us to get a feel for the essence of what's happening within town and what we can do to help move forward enforcement. And I know that there are questions about specific enforcement actions and where there's no legal action being taken, other than making the comment that legal action is being taken in those cases. Maybe you could fill us in where there's specific questions from commission members, and it might be more efficient because of the echo to go through the commission, and if anyone has questions, make note of which issue that you have questions on, and then we'll try to have an interaction in spite of the echo once we have Connie on mute. Connie, anything that you want to say before we get started, or do you think this format's the best way to address the questions that we have about zoning issues?
Well, I don't really know exactly what your questions are, so it's hard for me to answer. Are you asking me if the format, the spreadsheet, is the best way to present it?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
If you had any ideas on it, I just outlined. If you can mute for a moment.
Got it.
If you could.
You're good.
No, I'm just asking if you had any input on this. I just proposed how we're going to approach this. And that is to have the commission members go through the list, given the problems we're having technically with this. I think the most efficient way to handle this is for us to go through and highlight the items that we have questions about, and then we'll be quiet and let you address them after we unmute you. I don't know that there's a better way to handle that right now, unless we have a solution to the echo issue. With questions being asked while your microphone is unmuted.
That sounds fine. You go through and come up with any questions you have, and I'll try to answer them.
Okay. So if you could mute Connie, and then we're gonna go around the table and kind of do this in bulk, just so that it's efficient and it's audible, because it's really hard to follow this with the echo that's going on when you're unmuted, Connie. When you're talking, it's okay, but when somebody on this end is talking, it becomes a challenge. So, round commission members, yeah, might give them just a few minutes to go through the list and.
Rick, did you want to speak there and unseat Ed or Michelle?
Let's see, who else is not here that's a regular member?
Yes, Dick.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'll unseat you.
Yeah.
So with that said, Vera, you're in the meeting?
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you come in, I apologize.
I apologize.
That's fine. So we're going through the zoning enforcement report. So if there's, because we were having some technical problems with echo on the device, when Connie is engaged, she's muted at the moment. I suggested that we would go through the list. where we have questions on specific issues, that we pose them to her in bulk and, go around the table and give her all the questions, and we'll let Connie address those questions. How's everybody? Questions formulated?
I'll go. Yeah.
Who would like to go first? Anything on this side?
I'll go first if you want to. You want me just to ask all the questions? at
Yeah,
once?
just let's pose the questions. Connie, I'm gonna ask you just to make note of the questions. I'll make note of them too. And then we'll have you unmute and answer a few, and then maybe go back to any questions. A real interaction here is gonna be technically impossible given the echo.
Okay, I have three questions. They're less centered towards individual issues, but more on process. So my first question is, of the approximately 12 people on the open enforcement list, how many of them know that they're on the list? That's the first question. The second question is, Connie, if you could walk us through the process a little bit from, and again, I know this could probably be a lengthy explanation, but I don't mean it to be a lengthy explanation. So someone is accused of a violation, or they're found to be suspected of a violation. What is the process that's walked through to inform them of what to expect and, let them know of what the process is as far as notification through confirmation, consequences, and resolution, just like the A to Z high level walkthrough. And the third is what suggestions you have for us. I see some stuff on here like tall grass, and I see some other things that maybe on the face of it, I cock my head to a little bit as to maybe why we might be enforcing some of this stuff. And I understand why, because it's in the regulations. But are there any suggestions that you have on things that we should look at that would either make your life easier, make this more equitable to everyone and more fair? And I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about that. So those are my three questions.
Okay. Anyone, let's go around the table. If we could get a list of these, I think it's gonna be more efficient than going back and forth and back and forth. Tom? Anything?
It looks like a lot has been done. I have some specific issues, I'm gonna pass for right now. One that was. What do you do, the one that struck at me was 310 Route 66, where the owner denied you access. What did you do on that one? How do you handle that one?
Okay. Line item 18.
310 Route 66. And this is denied access. Local permit.
Okay. Anything else that you have a question about, Tom?
No, I'm all
Vera?
good.
Another question, yes, but I don't wanna duplicate and I don't wanna,
So don't duplicate, let's.
right,
let's-
I have some questions as far as stuff that I had mentioned that didn't even make the list. So I don't know
Why don't
where,
you highlight the questions that you have and we can try and address them?
well, the questions that I had are, I mean, they're violation issues, but they're not, they didn't even hit the list.
Okay, so you're saying that.
And I talked, we talked about them, I talked about the county and they haven't hit the list.
Well,
So what's
could
between?
you be specific so that? we
Sure, I can be
We're trying to
specific.
ask questions and getting answers.
Sure, couple things that are pretty long outstanding. I had mentioned, the county and I had talked about before, the conditions down to, on Carts Mill Road regarding, Hosmer Mountain.
So, Osborne
Equipment,
Mountain,
yeah, equipment out on a back porch that's just kind of left out there.
okay,
The buses for sale, although they have seemed to have dwindled down, I don't know if they dwindled down, because she did address it to him, because I wouldn't know, because I'm not exactly familiar with the exact address.
okay, when you say buses for sale, where in town?
It's down to, Roses,
The former Roses,
the
okay,
former Roses building. And then we had talked about previously the, buses and the signage in front of the the building that's now being occupied by Eastcon for the bus parking.
on Route 66,
On Route 6.
on the right
geez, I
hand
can't
side.
think.
The old RV place?
It's right near the RV place, yes, thank you.
And so what was your concern there?
The concern I had there was that we had a temporary sign out there, it seemed to be out there forever. I don't know if they don't have enough parking in the back, but their parking is extremely to the front of Route 6.
Did you-
You know, a lot of buses.
Did you take a look at a site plan to see if it was in conformance?
The site plan, when we did approve them, did not mention anything about parking in the front.
So you did review the site plan and you found that they weren't,
Well, I remember from when, on the commission, I didn't have to really review it. I
okay?
remember when we
So you know
approved it.
specifically that they're not compliant with the approved site plan.
I don't remember anything in the site plan regarding any parking of any school buses out almost onto the street of Route 6.
Okay, so maybe if you stopped in at the building office and looked at the site plan that was approved for that, and then if you know it to not be in conformance, then bring it up. Maybe a more effective way. It's just a suggestion, I think.
Oh, it could be. It could be.
Well, it definitely is. And all I'm saying is if you have a concern about a site, become knowledgeable about it, and if there's a violation that you think is important to pursue, then bring it up to Connie, but. Yeah, we have a meeting and I'm trying to keep this focused on issues we know to be factually a problem. So. That I'd suggest that if you have a concern about that, go into the building office, look at the approved site plan. If you know that it's not in conformance, then if you want to file a complaint with Connie, please do, and then we support that. But I'd like to be very specific with our question. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Anything else that we should look into? Pardon?
I don't think so, other than the one we're already in court over.
Okay. Why don't we unmute, let Connie address these questions, and then we'll go back around the table for a few more questions. But I wish there was a more efficient way to do this. If anyone has a suggestion as to a better way. I don't.
All I had a suggestion is that we have Connie here.
Yeah. So I thought we were going to. Yeah, I thought.
I am here. Does Vera know that I'm here on Zoom?
She's on Zoom. She's on Zoom.
I'm here.
Okay, it's not working really well from a technical standpoint. Actually, it's almost impossible. So let's make the best of what we have this evening.
Yeah, it's very difficult with the echo.
Point well taken. So Connie, Justin had 3 questions. I don't know if you made note of those things. If you'd like to try and address those with us, because
Yeah, he went so quickly. I got a little caught up on the first question, so I'll go through that first because I think Justin asked who on the list knows that they have a violation. Was that one of your questions, Justin?
that was the first question.
It's breaking up coming to me. Was that a yes?
Yes, 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 yes.
So I'll just run through the list. 1 Cardsmill, that's a new owner. The property was recently bought by Denny Gates. I had sent notices of violation to the prior owner. He didn't respond. There's multiple cars. There looks like some tractor trailers, tires, stuff parked behind that property. Denny Gates took it over. I talked to him about it. He said he's going to get it cleared up. So he is aware. I did send him a notice of violation. That's why he's aware. It was not strongly worded because I knew he had just taken over. So it was basically, you're in violation, and do you know this? And this is what the property was approved for by planning and zoning, and this is what you have going on. 22 Cardsmill, the grass is overgrown. It's been overgrown probably for over a year. I've sent them notices of violation. It had last year, it was cleared up. They had notices of violation for the same thing going back as far as 2015. So I just sent them, well, I didn't send it to him. I sent it to the town attorney today, citations to fine him because he's ignoring notices of violation. So right now I have fines. I think it's $1,550 for 31 days. I just need the town attorney to review the citation because we changed things and I'm no longer issuing citations based on an ordinance 15-8. Everything's been codified and I want to make sure I have the proper language. 61 Erdoni is the same thing. The owner is well aware that he has large construction vehicles and a huge trailer in the back of his property. He's been sent notice of violation. He's ignored them. I have a citation for him. I think it's about $3,000, also being reviewed by the town attorney. 24 Johnson Road has an old barn that's falling down. I had sent them a notice of violation, but Jason Noasad, our building inspector, had talked to the guy and sent him a notice of an unsafe structure. And so he was working with the owner to take the structure down. At this point, it's so overgrown, I don't think it would fall in the street, but it is an unsafe structure that I would consider blight. And so I'm working with Jason, who's working with the property owner. 7 Lake Ridge, I need to draft a notice of violation for them. It looks like they're running a contractor's yard there on the property. They are not aware I'm sending that. Everybody else before this, except for 57 Erdoni, was aware. And I'm sorry, 57 Erdoni, the grass was overgrown. I wrote up a notice of violation that was going to go out in the mail today, but I stopped it because I drove by and re-inspected today and the grass has been mowed. 10 Newberry vehicles, junk. I sent a notice of violation to them. They are aware of it. It's not the first time. They've cleaned some up and now it's back again. 38 Pine, I had sent a notice of violation last year. The owner insists that he has PZC approval, so I need to review the files and try to find something on that. 65 Route 6, that's the old Eric sawmill. I had a complaint about noise, which I think may be coming from that. The person wasn't sure where the noise was coming from. And I drove around and Jason drove around, and the only thing we could think of was the Eric sawmill. And I need to review their approval and go and inspect the site and see if they're in compliance with their approvals there. 19 Route 6, it's a new owner. They have chickens. I got a complaint from a neighbor because the chickens are running free. And I've sent them a notice of violation requesting voluntary compliance. They just bought the house. 310 Route 66, the owner does know that he's in violation. As far as denying access, it would have been something I would discuss with the town attorney, but the violation on that site has to do with structures that are up against the property line, and the proposed reg changes that you have would allow 200 square foot, under 200 square foot sheds with no setbacks. So I'm not going to pursue that until I know where the reg changes end up. 394 Route 87. This is the gentleman who's also burning and has a structure up against the property line. So I believe the burning the town was trying to address with the new ordinance. I don't think so far it's gone very well, but as far as the structures, it's the same thing as 310 Route 66. I'm not going to have him move the structure to find out he doesn't need a setback, and whenever these reg changes go through, and then have him move it back. And then I'd like to also address what Vera said. Vera does tend to find a lot of zoning violations, and she's lives in town, has lived there for years, I'm assuming, right, Vera? And she oftentimes will tell me the name of the property or some obscure name that means nothing to me. And so when I'm receiving a complaint, they now have to be in writing, but I also need an address because I can't usually relate to a reference with an old property owner's name. I did get the complaint about Jerry's Marine last Friday. I happened to be on my way into Columbia to look at something else. So I did look at that, Vera. I don't know if you got my email. There was no,
Yes,
there was no problem with the site.
I got your email,
Okay.
and it was very well descriptive. And I haven't had a chance to respond because I figured it was coming to the meeting tonight. It was very detailed and I appreciated the response, and I think it was a job well done regarding that issue.
Well, thank you. And that one, I told the owner if he wants to expand the parking of the boats, he needs to come in for a modification of his site plan. And then, Justin, the other thing you were asking me was, you seem to feel that maybe some of the issues that are on here, maybe we don't need to have as violations. I'm not really sure what specifically.
I can clarify.
That would help, yeah.
Yeah, I think the question that you're referring to is, Well, I did mention, I think it wraps up into my last question was what suggestions you have for us. So there's a spectrum of thought on enforcement and our regulations as a whole. And one of the things that I personally don't want to see, and as part of this commission, is regulations abused and people being abused because we end up having feuds between neighbors and they leverage zoning enforcement. So really my question was, that's part of it. It could be broad, your answer could be broader than that specific question, but what suggestions do you have for us as a commission? I'll be a little bit crass. Do you see anything that's just stupid in the regulations that you're like, this is dumb? Like I shouldn't be spending my time doing this or enforcing this. That's kind of my question, is what suggestions do you have from us? And maybe you don't, or maybe you do. That's just kind of what I'm curious about.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things you were trying to address that I think would make everybody's life easier was the requirement that a zoning permit cover a lot of small things. And it listed things like satellite dishes and generators and the propane tanks and the split mini systems. And I think, I mean, personally, I would say if those are to building code and they're within so many feet of the house, they shouldn't need a zoning permit. I don't think I'd go as far as saying 250 gallons or over 250, but I do think that was one area that needed addressing in the regulations. With respect to neighbors complaining about each other, that's since the pandemic, that's just boomed. I get more complaints about ridiculous things than I can even tell you, like leaves are blowing in my yard. But I think the fact that we now require people to put a complaint in writing will help that. It's not anonymous, so if you're gonna complain about your neighbor, then they're gonna know about it. I used to think that was a bad thing, but since I've had so many silly complaints, to be nice about it, then I see that as an okay thing. I don't think regulations are necessarily a bad thing. I think a lot of the issues we have is when people don't comply with the regs. And I probably am not in agreement with you on the changes you're making for sheds, if they're gonna have no setbacks. And the way the language that's in the packet today also would not allow me to do a zoning permit for sheds that are in the Columbia overview. Columbia Lake, which means I can't do a nutrient allocation calculations with people. So I think that's gonna significantly have a negative effect on the lake down the road, but those are the only changes I've really been looking at. And you had a third question. Can you let me know what that was?
I think it was about the process.
Yeah.
It's a second
I
question.
apologize to everyone else. I don't want to monopolize all the time, but I'm curious as to the process. From the point someone is accused of a violation or a suspected violation, what is the general process that you go through from start to finish? And I understand that that can vary depending on the situation. And then also, do you feel that through that process, the person who's being accused of a violation fully understands the process and what their rights are?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean about what the rights are, but if somebody makes a complaint, I usually will try to contact the person who's the violator and talk to them if I can. I try to settle things without having to send out notice of violation. But I don't always have the information. I don't always have a contact, a phone number or an email that's accurate. So, and it depends on what the violation is. If I drive something and by a property and there's 6 abandoned cars there. I'm pretty sure the people know that they're doing something they're not supposed to do. So, you know, if I send them a notice of violation, it outlines what the violation is and it gives them a time period to address it before anything else happens. If they don't address it, then I usually will send out a second notice of violation. I don't typically go to the level of fining people and issuing citations until I've gone through that process of notifying them and giving them ample time to correct the situation.
Okay. Tom, you'd asked about 310 Route 66. Are you comfortable with Connie's explanation?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And Vera, you had brought up specific things that are not on the list. Osborne Mountain, the former Rose Brothers property, the RV place.
It was the old, the place I can't remember was old Bolton Construction that we approved for the East Time parking back there.
But think
And that's true, it is true on some instances, I didn't have the exact number, but they were all on a fairly main road, I did have, you know, the street name for Osborne Mountain, of Cards Mill, I didn't have the exact number. I did look up some and tried to forward those. And in a couple of the instances, the violations were so like out there in your face. I was just thinking it was pretty obvious.
at this point, I think we do have a process in place to put complaints in writing. If you have concerns, let's get them started that way. And it's I think that's a big improvement, putting them in writing. It's appreciated. So anything you want to go into in more detail on that list of 3 things, plus the 4th being the Jerry's Marine location? Or
No,
just one
that
follow-up?
was handled above and beyond, probably because we've gotten to this point. Which was great, I just, had hoped that the other ones had received as much attention as this one. And I will from now on take a look at the site approvals on writing, but I think you'll probably find that for the most part, if I had been on the board when something was approved, I would probably rate my memory probably to close to 90%. So,
Okay. That being said, I'm gonna go around the table. I did have a couple of questions I'd like to throw out there. Connie, the current report's a huge improvement over the past one that really helps us a lot. One thing that's not on here is the date of the original infraction or the date that you were originally aware of it. And that's a very important thing, because I'd like to track the time open on these things. And I know some of these are going to be difficult to assign now for longer standing violations, but the earliest awareness you had as a zoning agent of that would be just one more column with a enforcement date, or not an enforcement date, but a date of the awareness of the potential violation would be helpful. And then
What's the date of the complaint?
in the date of the complaint.
Yeah.
Assuming now complaints are documented and formalized and in writing, I think it's a really positive move because it eliminates any question as to the first awareness of that on newer complaints. And that's really my only observation at this point. Just having you able to talk to us is huge. I'm gonna move on to Bob Powell.
Thanks, Rick. Just a quick typo, I think on line 8, 1 Cards Mill Road, you had new owner as of 6/15/22. I think that's supposed to be 23, isn't it, Connie?
I think you're right. I
Yeah.
apologize.
No, that's okay.
I will fix that.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you. I do think I used to have the date when I received the complaint, and I tried to make the format less complicated, but I can certainly go back to that and add, I'll search and see if what I have and add them back in for the initial complaint. I used to also have who made the complaint, and I had the owner's name on here, so I did try to kind of make this format a little less complicated and easier to review.
Okay,
I think the biggest issue I have is understanding the timing of all these events. And I think Rick's suggestion of having the date of the complaint is good, because then the clock starts ticking on that date. It would be helpful to know, do you contact them within 2 weeks? Well, first you have to do is vet the complaint, obviously. You have to make sure that the complaint is a valid complaint and it has some standing. You do that first, I imagine, and then you would contact the owner. So, and then is there a follow-up letter? And then if nothing happens over a set period of time, then there's a second letter. And then if nothing happens, then there's obviously a notice of a violation. But it's important from my standpoint to understand what the timing is of that. I mean, if you send a letter out on the 1st of the month, do you give them 30 days to do something, to respond, or to have some action? After 30 days, then you send the next one. Or is it not well defined, I guess? That's my question. It's important to understand also what the dates of the notice of violation, when are those sent out? Some of them are noted, some of them are not. And then, if you send the notice of violation, how many days after that does the town take legal action? Again, that's part of the process. I think that's what Justin's needs.
And unfortunately, I can't say I always look at something in a week or 2 weeks, because my primary function is to issue permits here. And I'm only here 2 days a week. So something could come in and it could take me 2-3 weeks to get out to even look at it. That's just the function of the job here. We've been we have increased building in the last year since we got our permit link, but we have a lot of people have been adding on, building sheds, redoing stuff in their homes on the exterior. So most of my time gets spent looking at permits and making sure the permits, the stuff being constructed is constructed in accordance with our regulations. And we've had a lot of new homes constructed, and those take a significant amount of time to review the plans, to review the sites, in some cases to do the nutrient allocation calculations with people, checking the silt fence and erosion control measures. So a lot of inspections with that. All of that takes precedent over the enforcement. All of that has a time period that I have to approve things in, or they're automatically approved.
I have a question about that.
Unfortunately, enforcement always takes a backseat to that. So I'm happy to put the date that things come in. And as far as keeping track of all the dates on this form, if I inspect something and meet with somebody and send a notice of violation out, there's only so much I can fit on this. So maybe I need to drop the original things off and just give you the last 2 actions or something. And, as things slow down, I am more on top of the enforcement. I think having complaints come in writing will actually help with that. But I can't promise everything's going to happen. I look at it in 2 weeks. A letter goes out a week after that. Typically, if it's easy for me to solve, if I can knock on somebody's door, which I've done, and talk to them and have them correct something without having it ever go on this list, then that's preferable to me.
It's important for us to understand. Turn your thing off. Okay, it's important for us to understand the nature of all the complaints, because those are reflective of the regulations. If there's a consistent complaint that comes through, maybe it's a trigger for us to change the regulations. So even if you knock on someone's door and resolve it without any writing, it's important for us to understand what that issue was. Okay, now the other question I have, which is slightly separate from this, you mentioned the nutrient allocation plan, and then you spend a lot of time doing that with owners. Are you the person that's doing that, or is it the owner's responsibility to do the nutrient allocation plan?
The owner has to meet the nutrient allocation requirements, but I go through the form with them and give them options on how to address things. And I do all the calculations before to see what you're shaking your head. Are you?
I don't think that's the way I don't think that's the way it's set up. Isn't it the applicant's responsibility?
The applicant can fill out the different surfaces, but I have a program that I fitted in, that I plug everything in to see where it stands on how much phosphorus runoff that there is. And then the way our program is, there are different things you can do to address that. So when we have something like a new construction house, we can go back and forth trying to find the best methods of infiltrating stuff. And I work hand in hand with people. I mean, the other option, what I believe used to happen in the past, was everybody had to get an engineer.
That's not exactly true. That's not exactly true, Don.
What?
That's not true.
Okay.
Because when I did my nutrient plan, I did it myself. There was an interactive program that I could plug things in, and it would give me the factors, and it would figure it all out. I didn't need the zoning enforcement officer to do it.
Was that the Excel
I think
chart?
it's the owner's obligation to do it.
Was that the Excel chart that you
Yes.
used to interact? Then that came from me.
All right.
And
So
most people don't understand how to do that.
well, it's not your obligation to teach them how to do it. It's their obligation to get it done.
It's my
Connie, could I
obligation
ask you
to
to
make,
mute for a minute? 'Cause I
it's
wanted to
my
say something.
obligation.
Yeah, Connie, I'm just asking you to mute so that it isn't muddled. The zoning regulation is very specific. We designed it so that it was a simple enough process that an owner could do it themselves. But they're not obligated. They can hire an engineer if they feel it's above their skill level. We very specifically wrote the regulation with absolutely no responsibility on the part of our zoning enforcement agent to design a nutrient allocation plan for a homeowner. That's a function that rests with either the homeowner or their legal representative. Now, if they have specific questions and they want to address them to you, I'd say, great, let's be friendly, let's help them. But this is a process that we tried to distill down and make simple enough that somebody who wanted to take the initiative and be familiar with the process could actually do this themselves. And in the case when I did a plan in 2016, I did hire an engineer just because I didn't want there to be any appearance of favoritism because I was on planning and zoning. But I could have actually, I redid everything myself there, and it was relatively simple to do. So if somebody doesn't want to take the time to understand the process, then they can hire a professional. But that isn't your function. You're there to check their work to make sure that there's nothing erroneous about it, but not to work with them hand in hand to design a nutrient allocation plan for their property. That's just not our function as an agency. That's just not what our regulation says. And I can't imagine that that's a reasonable expectation from the public. And please, if anyone disagrees with me, tell me, but that, yeah, you should not be spending a lot of time on nutrient allocation plans. You should be looking at finished products that are presented to you that meet it based on available science. And yeah, I would expect that they would reach out and they might say, well, you know, how do I construct a mulch bed? And in 20 seconds, I think you can give them a summary of that. But it's up to them to come up with a plan, not us.
The form that we have, people can fill out what the current conditions are of their property. And that gives you a number for what the current phosphorus is. And then you tell them they have to improve it by 10%. And we tell them, well, you can do mulch beds, you can do this, you can do that, but that's not a calculation. most people don't have the Excel chart. That's not a public chart. That's only given out to a few people. But if you want me to tell people this is your responsibility, and if you don't know how to do it, then you can hire an engineer, I'm perfectly happy to do that.
That's the structural sense.
Okay.
You know, I looked at it, if you can use that a second, just trying to make this more discernible. Yeah, if you take a look at the verbiage in the regulation, and believe it, and I don't have this in front of me this moment, I believe, it's there to support an owner design plan with, and if they want to know what the coefficient values are for certain types of ground cover, we can provide those, but to come up with the plan is not your responsibility. That's the responsibility of either the owner applicant or their representative. And it's always been that way. And so for this to have progressed, this is what's so useful about interacting with you in this meeting. We found an area where you're performing engineering functions for the public that our regulations were specifically designed to avoid the need for in the case of an informed applicant. And if they're not informed, then they can hire someone.
So I still need to check the calculations they give me to make sure they do what they're supposed to do, that they reduce the runoff by 10%. Do you agree with that?
Yes, you're there to check, make sure that their plan is accurate and that it meets our legal requirement, which is a pretty straightforward process. It either does or it doesn't meet it.
Okay, I entirely disagree with you on this, having been doing this for 6-7 years, but I will do what you're saying. And when somebody comes in with an application, I will tell them they need to figure out a reduction of 10%, and I will give them the stuff in our regs for them to do it.
Okay. Hold on. Connie, could you mute for a second? Are you all set?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on to Walt Tabor's question.
I have two points. One is that, I think we're heading down the road of double standards here. We want to do everything to make it easier for a new business, easier for this plan, easier for that plan, easier, simpler regs, simpler processes. But when 4,500 residents in this town are gonna struggle with something, we aren't willing to give them help at the counter, at the building department. And I'm not saying necessarily that what Connie's doing is right, but I think we need to look at this. Every one of us needs to look at that regulation that's in place and that process. And Vera needs to see how she thinks it works. Tom needs to think how he thinks it works. Justin, and on and on and on, because if 7 out of 10 of us can't navigate through that process, there's something wrong with the system.
Yeah.
And it needs to be simplified. If we're gonna take the approach, you're on your own, because what will happen if we don't do that is that people will stop giving a crap about the nutrient allocation plan. Then they'll come in and they'll just do whatever the hell they want without permits. That's what will happen. The system has to be able to be navigated through without help, or give them help. Our taxpayers, our citizens.
But that's not our obligation. That's not the town's obligation to do engineering
No, you're
services.
wrong. I'm not saying it's
Engineering services. You're talking about engineering
No,
services.
but we have to give them a process that they can navigate through.
The nutrient allocation plan of the Excel spreadsheet is pretty simple. You know,
Well, in your mind, you're an
in
architect.
your mind too.
Maybe, but
You've done.
I'm an engineer, you're an architect. Will every person that is a resident of the Indoor Lake or the Columbia Lake overlay zone have the background that you have or I have to do that plan, that allocation plan?
And Connie,
But it has to be done.
we're gonna
I'm
digress
saying we
away
need
from
to
this.
evaluate.
No, but the plan has to be done.
It does, well, I'm
Like that.
with you. I'm
That's-
with you.
So the question is who does it?
Or is it simple enough for the public?
Let
We
me,
need to
let
figure
me,
out a way that this is
Well-
not a problem.
this is one of those cases where I don't agree with you. And
It's okay if you don't.
I know it is.
I'm just telling you,
friends. We
If
respect
we're
each
all
other.
sitting here arguing about how hard it is to do something,
But
we have to find a way to make it public, simple.
I know, but let me just throw all this out. You're putting an addition on the back of your house and you need trusses to span from one wall to the other. You don't go to our building inspector and say, how big do I need to make them? You determine what will meet code. And you have it engineered and set up to meet code, and you bring it forward for approval. It's the same process here. We designed the simplest possible nutrient allocation plan when we designed this. What was it, 24 years ago, Connie? I think.
Is it as simple? There's contradiction here because what Connie is saying, the spreadsheet that is available for people, the Excel spreadsheet that's isn't available. But you're saying it was available to
I did it,
you.
and I did my own.
Well, let's find out if it is or it isn't, because it's
It's not available to the public.
Well, why not?
The Excel chart, because the Excel chart was something that Paula made up so that I could change things interactively to get to the number we needed to see, okay, if we do 200 feet, will this work? Or if we do 100 feet, will this work? If I give it out to the public, we need to lock all the formulas. We could probably do it, but a lot of people do not know how to use Excel. A lot of the people,
They people money, and if they can't do it, they're gonna go out and hire somebody without.
Could I ask everyone to quiet down a second? Connie, could you mute a second? Let's not have this discussion with Connie right now. Let's have this as a commission during open discussion later on. I think this has to do with zoning enforcement, this discussion, Connie, we're gonna discuss this at a later point in the meeting. If you're here, great. If you're not, then I'll communicate with you offline. But clearly, the intention of this regulation from its first inception was that a finished product would be presented to the zoning enforcement agent for review. And that the concept of how simple to make this to comply with was inherent in the design of the regulation. And that there was a time when you could download the Excel spreadsheet from our town website. That it's not available now is something that should be corrected. And it's a very easy concept to understand. We have plenty of support materials on that. Yes, you're up.
I wanted to.
Yeah, hold on, Connie, please.
I wanted to ask Connie if this is where she's spending so much time on average. How much time is she giving or spending with?
Let's go around, finish going around the table with questions.
Yeah,
Because Walt had questions he can pose and Don has questions, and we'll get back to your question.
And I got ahead of Ed, so if he has questions, then.
Okay, all right.
yeah,
So
you stepped ahead.
we'll get back to your questions. I'm trying to keep this as orderly and time efficient as possible.
Right now.
Well, so
It's really just that there's clearly a problem with it, because if she has to put that kind of time into it, right, wrong, or indifferent, if she has to, one of two things is wrong. Either she's doing something wrong, or the program is wrong. And we need to know that before we jump on Connie about something, because
The program's
that's
not
what
being
we're
given
doing.
out. Program's not being given out, so you don't know.
You know what, let's not resolve the nutrient allocation issue while we're.
So this, you want to selectively yes or no do things, because.
No,
it seems like
I'm asking that we have a commission discussion during open
We spent
discussion.
40 minutes with 4 people on that side of the table, and you're saying that you can give me 5?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying
I'll
is,
pass.
we,
I'll pass.
no, what I'm saying is,
I'll pass, right?
Let's pass on the nutrient application, but let's do this.
let's go through zoning enforcement issues as we were. And if we have a concern about our ongoing process of what's going on in the office, in terms of what the zoning enforcement agent is spending time on, let's talk about that separate from, now we know that she's doing these for people. Connie, I don't mean to talk about you in the second person. Connie, we know that you're doing these for people with the best of intentions. And we obviously have a disagreement as a commission about whether that's the right thing to be doing for them. And I think we should resolve this among amongst the commission members, not while we're asking you questions about enforcement issues. That's really what it seems.
I'd like to interject that I do spend, when I have to do a nutrient allocation for a new construction, that takes time, but also reviewing the site, making sure they're not dumping water onto a neighboring property with their outlets from footing drains and curtain drains and things like that also take time. So I don't have, I have an update from July because I was thinking of sending you more of a breakdown of what I do. I decided it wasn't really going to be helpful, but I can tell you in July, I issued 9 zoning permits. 1 included a single family. I did 7 certificates of zoning compliance on completed projects that included inspections. I did site inspections for erosion and soil controls and staked building locations, 7 of those. Permit reviews with request for additional information, 1. Site inspections for ENS control bond release, 3. Inspections in response to possible violations, 9. That was my chart in July. I have,
Doing this in
yes, it takes time to do them, but the permitting itself takes the bulk of my time. And you have to remember, I'm not full-time, I'm here 2 days a week. So I think if we want to get into how difficult the nutrient allocation thing is, I'd be happy to print out several recent plans that were prepared by me with the property owner and show you those, and you can maybe, I would hope you would reassess how simple you think they are. And I don't think making somebody hire an engineer when they're adding 150 square foot shed, which triggers a 10% reduction requirement of runoff, is appropriate. But we can table this this discussion for another meeting if you like, or maybe a more informal meeting.
We could always.
To your point, this whole
Yeah.
thing wraps
Hold-
around
hold-
process.
hold on.
Yeah, so.
So that's a suggestion is that, one of the issues is a 150 square foot shed that could contain all of its runoff in a rock bed underneath that triggers a nutrient allocation plan. There's something that.
Well, that's because anything over 120 square feet requires 10% improvement to the lot. If the shed is under 120 square feet, then it's a 2-inch capture, capturing 2 inches of runoff from that particular structure. And that's when I usually just require stone underneath. Now, if there's a no zoning permit required, none of that's going to happen. So the changes you're making to zoning permit won't require any of this up to over 200 square, until you get to 200 square feet. So
Okay.
that will be a big change.
I'm gonna ask you to mute for a moment and I'm gonna go on to Walter and to Don. And then pose any questions that they have so that you can respond to those. I'm just trying to keep this orderly. Paul, are you good? Okay, Don?
Putting aside Walt's observation, the only question I had was the 2 that are undergoing legal action, where do they stand?
If they're undergoing legal action, we can't discuss them.
Okay.
You got
Okay.
So right now, the 149 Route 6, which is Newmac, has filed with the court that he's going to represent himself. That's where that stands. Fornell didn't respond to the court case filed, so the town attorney issued a motion to default due to failure to plead. Other than that, there's, it's in the town attorney's hands. I don't have much involvement other than those particular updates that they sent to me.
I'm gonna go back around the table together. Justin, did you have anything else? Ed, did you have anything?
No.
No.
We need to have more conversations about this,
Yeah.
but I don't have any questions right now.
Okay, Vera? Anything else?
No.
To bring up?
None.
Just one minor observation. I think as a commission, we need to talk about the nutrient allocation plan because we have varying perspectives on it, and we will. And I invite you to join that discussion at any point, Connie, because we really want your input on this. The idea that you were doing the nutrient allocation plans for the public, that was something that I wasn't aware of. And maybe will be the process going forward based on our conversations. And if it is, we want to make sure you have enough time to do them. And then just bringing up the issue of, for example, the 150 square foot shed is something that triggers a 10% reduction on the nutrient allocation plan of a property, especially a developed property. That's something that we need to hear from you. That's one small example of the things that we really need to hear from you that we might address to make your job more streamlined. So this is a good start. I think on a periodic basis, we would like to meet with you. If there's any way we can do it in person or we can solve the technical issues so we could have a better interaction, we need to do that. And it would be, well, it's not absolute about a visible Zoom. It would be much better if we could do video Zoom as opposed to just
I have one question.
Yes.
Hey, Connie, I have, Tom, you do this on 2 days a week, is that correct?
Yes, I'm here 2 days a week.
So how many hours a day? How many hours do you?
My position is approved for 19 hours a week. It's a yearly total that breaks down to 19 hours a week.
Okay, two questions, and I may be answer to my, did you?
This interaction won't work. You need to formulate all the questions and then let Connie respond because we have to keep muting and unmuting.
Okay, my question is, do you want to have more hours or do you not want to have more hours?
That's an interesting question. Probably, I don't know. I mean, if I had to be honest, and I've spoken to Mark Walter about this, I think the position probably needs somebody full-time. Do I want to do that? No.
That's really what I'm trying to get at,
Yeah, I mean, that would be a big change for the town.
It seems that we've dropped the ball as a town, and this should be a full-time job and not 19 hours a week. Would you agree with that?
Permitting has increased significantly. I mean, you can talk to Jason Oasad, the building inspector. People are building, have been building, but that may slow down. I don't know. But over the last couple of years, the workload has increased significantly.
Okay,
Thank you.
is everyone all set here? Connie, thank you very much. Right. We're gonna be talking about this in open discussion tonight, I'm sure, about the role on the nutrient allocation plan. We obviously have different perspectives on it, but we almost always get to the same place with each other. All right,
Okay.
thank you
Okay.
again.
Thanks, Connie.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the next agenda item. Public Act 23-142, Family and Group Child Care. John,
Hi, can you guys both hear me and see the screen?
yes,
Okay, so this is Public Act 23-142, which changed municipal oversight and regulation of group childcare homes and family childcare homes. And it's for all municipalities. So there are a couple of relevant sections. Section 1 changed the zoning enabling statute that basically says no zoning regulation shall treat any family childcare home or group childcare home located in a residence and licensed and duly licensed in a manner different from single or multifamily dwellings. So that's group childcare or family childcare in a residence. And then later in the Public Act, subsection A here says zoning regulations shall not prohibit the operation in a residential zone of a family childcare or group childcare home located in a residence or require a special zoning permit for such an operation. And so this is, effective, next week, October 1st. So all municipalities are required to treat those things as basically as of right in residential zones. Now, you may ask the question, what precisely are childcare, family childcare, and group childcare? Email from our town attorney clarifies this. Group childcare offers care to not less than nor less than 7 nor more than 12 related or unrelated children on a regular basis, or that meets the definition of family childcare home, except that it operates in a facility other than a private home. A family childcare home is private residential home that takes care of up to 6 children. So, in other words, if you are in a residence, if you're in a house and you want to operate a daycare, this law is basically saying you can, assuming you get registered with the state, take care of up to 12 children within an existing residence in a residential zone with an administrative zoning permit. So that's, again, it's up to 12. And then I'd also so the question is, how does Columbia currently regulate this? And you will note, so this is special permit regulations 5272, childcare centers as defined and regulated by state statutes are allowed, but by special permit in residential districts. So in other words, the state has said, again, for this category, this limited category of daycare centers. So, I mean, obviously, childcare centers, this does not have the same limits as the, basically up to 12 children. In theory, you could have a freestanding non-residential daycare center by a special permit, but those two categories defined by the state, group childcare and family childcare, up to 12 children, now needs to be basically as of right. So
You what?
As of right.
As of right, okay.
as a administrative zoning permit. So, what this basically is going to require is, I think the easier path is going ahead and changing our regulations to shift that. We probably want to add a nuanced definition of family childcare and group childcare to distinguish it from larger facilities, and then move that nuanced category into an as of right use in the residential districts. The alternative is to basically just instruct your zoning officer to, if anyone comes forward with one of these, just reference the state statutes and go ahead and approve it because the state statutes override local zoning. But it would just be cleaner to have our local zoning reflect the new state law. But just wanted to make sure that this commission was aware of that change in the law.
I have a question for Jonathan. John, multifamily or cluster, as we've been candidly discussing it as, is considered residential. How do they deal with that in a cluster housing situation? So someone, and I'm posing this question, if somebody was an owner of a cluster unit or a multifamily unit, they would be able to have daycare, family daycare of up to 6, or group between 7 and 12.
The very simple answer is yes, if they got licensed by the state. My assumption is, and not being very familiar with the state licensing procedures, I would very strongly assume that the state licensing procedures would require a minimum square footage, multiple means of egress from the dwelling unit, access to outside, play area. So if you were on the third floor of a garden apartment or something like that, and there was really only one way in, and no yard to play in, my suspicion would be that the state would be unlikely to license such a facility. But yeah, if you are in a residential dwelling, whether it's single family or multifamily, and the state gives you that license, then yes, the town would have to permit it as of right.
License is required for either residential up to 6 or 7 to 12, or is it just for the 7 to 12 group?
It's both, but the 7 to 12 needs to be in a residence. The state distinguished that because you can't have a what we call the group childcare in a separate freestanding facility, a little
Yeah.
commercial plaza or whatever. And the state did distinguish that. They're just talking about those two categories that would be existing in residences in residential areas.
It'd be probably important for us to know what the standard the state is using on their applications. Because we have to consider things like egress when we approve a residential property. Egress, parking,
fire and building code things. But the standard would be higher if you're having a bunch of kids over that you're taking responsibility for in a professional way. It's fine if your own kids eat the dirt in the backyard, but if you have a daycare center, you have to be more careful.
So this isn't for new construction, this is for everything, right?
The statute didn't say anything about sort of what came first, like, does it need to be in an existing residential dwelling that's existed for 25 years or something like that? Or if you're planning to build a brand new house and you also want to put a daycare in that brand new house, the statute is silent on that. And I would assume the same.
Anything required notification wise to the town residents on this is just.
If you don't require notification, oh, I'm sorry. Well, you would have to notify if we're gonna change the regulations. Requires a public hearing. So there's notification for that. But if you're just talking about establishing a new daycare use in your house, no. If you don't require, a notification to let people know that you're building a new house, then you don't require unique notification for the daycare.
So no notification is required, is that my understanding?
Nope. Correct.
Okay.
Right.
I'm just thinking that it should be.
This is all about reducing the burden on families and daycare, childcare.
Yeah, it really takes it out of our purview altogether. So John, we would really want to clean up our regulations around this. Because we have no other
Definitely
choice.
feel the same way. Let's just make our regulations
really
compliant
do.
with state statute. Yeah, could you give us suggested changes to the regs to be compliant with state statutes?
Yes, I'll work with Rich Roberts on that, and I suspect what we'll probably do for the next meeting, the first meeting of October, we'll have sort of a formal application that can be received and scheduled for a hearing.
Okay, and maybe at the end of the verbiage, or as prescribed by state statute.
Yeah.
Just to get it.
So further monkeying is covered.
Yes.
So essentially, this is a planning and zoning issue because they're allowing these uses in a residential district.
Yeah, but the state is
That's right.
overriding the local authority. Yeah.
Right. So we should be in line with what the state statute is.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
As far as the licensing is concerned, building official, fire marshal, well, that's not our purview.
That's the other.
And I'll tell you, there are specific sections in the building code that address daycare centers and facilities like this. And there's some pretty strict requirements.
Yes.
You're not just gonna be able to put this into your house and not do any modification with it.
Of course,
Yeah, handicap accessible, all kinds of.
It was a family of 12, we wouldn't have any say, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna move us on to section 8 if everyone's good with that. So, first up, Justin, you wanna,
You want me to blast through these real quick, because it's,
I'd not, well, you know,
You're on.
all right, well, let me give everyone the overview on what we've been working on, and we can figure out how to proceed from here. So obviously, we all agree that there's.
Justin,
Yeah.
maybe if you do a real quick overview and say review for the next meeting.
Okay, let's do that. Real quick overview.
Yeah.
So the three that we're looking to discuss and move forward is first is a revision to section 3, which is the definition of a structure. So we won't obviously get into the nuance of that, but there's lots of discussion that we need to have around that. And we've worked on some definition changes and some category changes with that. The second one is a minor modification of approvals for approved special permits, section 51.7. So that is if someone gets approved under a special permit process, right now, the way it stands, if they want to come back and have any minor changes, it could be the business hours, number, whatever we stipulate within the special permit process that gets put on the land record. Right now, they have to come back if they want any minor change and go through the entire process again and pay the fees and go through the time of doing it and the public hearing. So we're looking at making that easier for minor uncontroversial changes. And the third is looking at all of the businesses that are specified in a commercial zone that require a special permit to move forward. And kind of asking ourselves, of all of these businesses listed, is it appropriate that they all are on this list of having to go through the special permit? And can we take some of them, most of them, whatever the number is, we've defined that, and roll those into a site plan so that it just makes the entire process easier and less cumbersome, especially when we talk about some of the business categories that are really not controversial. So look forward to discussing that in further detail as we move forward, but those are the first three that we're looking from the subcommittee to work on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good, yeah, we the proposed regulation changes, the subcommittee, and we didn't agree in the end on everything, but it was really well thought through and really researched well. Which Justin headed up the subcommittee and he did a great job. The idea is to make it simpler.
Can you give me an example of an unregulated structure that doesn't require a building permit?
Yeah,
Under 200 square
we're
feet.
not gonna discuss this in a lot of depth tonight.
I got plenty of examples for later.
I'm trying to think of what that could
Don,
be.
those questions.
No structure under 200 square feet unless it's attached requires a building permit.
Yes.
Required.
We're not gonna get into that. Thank you, appreciate it. But the idea, the comment from Connie about the 150 square foot structure was helpful, but we're not gonna get into it tonight. Read what's proposed, and we're gonna dig into this next meeting, and we will definitely have a next meeting. It won't get postponed, even if there's nothing else on the agenda. Communication and reports, anything?
I have nothing further.
Okay, commission open discussion. I did want to bring up something that came up. John, I wanted to highlight to the commission that I met with you in the zoning office, had to do with the Wild Motors change in their site plan from what we approved. And they made a bunch of changes, almost all of them reducing the size of the project. And in one case, going a little closer to a sideline. And I gave a perspective that it wasn't a substantial change to the special permit approval that we gave them. And I think it was a reduction in scope, and it didn't require a new special permit or even commission review. So the buildings can go a little farther out to the left, but mostly go farther back from the road than was originally proposed. Is that a reasonable summary of it, John? Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
a
sorry,
smaller.
that was, yeah, it's overall a reduction of the extent to which they were approved for expansion, essentially. They're drawing back.
And I just felt that was, it was reasonable to give my perspective that administrative approval of that change was reasonable.
Thanks.
Thanks. So blame me. I own that one. And that's really how I would like to be able to operate when it makes common sense and very minor changes.
He wants to be the man.
I'm teasing.
No, I just,
I'm teasing.
I felt somebody needed it, and there was some question in John's mind whether that was in the realm of something that he could approve, so he asked me about it, and I said, yes, I feel that, no question, you can approve that.
I think it's important to understand what minor modifications is.
Yes,
What's the definition of minor? What's minor to me might not be minor to you, or vice versa. So I think
smaller structure than what's approved.
Yeah.
And thus is-
I'm already, I'm just laughing.
Why?
No, because of the way he's right, about right. I mean, minor is, it's like when a doctor has, surgery, it's minor. When you have it, it's major.
Okay. The other thing had to do with nutrient allocation plans, and if you want to have a discussion about this tonight, great. If you want to put it as an agenda item on for our next meeting, what's your pleasure?
I think it's going to require an agenda item in some extended period of time. I don't think we want to spend the time tonight.
Take it.
But one of the things I would like to say is that, I think we have to understand what our expectations are for the zoning enforcement officer. And then understand if that's achievable, given the 2 days a week or whatever it is.
Or the reverse, what do they have on their plate?
Well, yeah, part of that is understanding what they do.
Exactly.
I mean, what does the zoning enforcement officer do and what does the inland wetlands?
Yeah,
Because
regardless,
they've gotta do this, they can't duplicate effort, they can't butt heads, they've got to melt.
But something's broken.
yeah, so regardless of how you feel on this,
And
she's doing something that we didn't think she had to do.
maybe she's not supposed to do.
That's what I mean.
But the point is that she.
So somewhere the
Whatever
communication
reason,
broke down.
something's broken.
So John, I'd ask us to add that as an agenda item for our next meeting to discuss basically the result of the conversation this evening.
About nutrient allocation specifically.
Enforcement officer.
I'm gonna throw one more thing out, it's we're in public speak, you said, right?
Yeah, it's open discussion.
9/30 of our complaints, which is pretty darn close to a third, are blight. That's something that needs to be rediscussed.
This goes back to Bob's question about expectations.
Lawn mowing,
We have a very level of expectation. And I think where was this helpful today? It was having Connie here to discuss the process and figure out the holes in the process, which we didn't do, but we at least got an idea of that there is a breakdown in the process. This, I don't want to say process a million times, but that's what it is, and that goes to your point too. We don't know, I don't know, I've never filled out that Excel spreadsheet, I don't know how difficult it is, but maybe there's an opportunity
might wanna look at it.
to look at it and say, with this level of additional instruction, she doesn't have to touch this much, but we can't say that until we have the discussion. So I would, my concern or my suggestion would be, let's not hyper focus on one item. Let's look at it in the beginning from a broad level of what the process is, even if we have to write it down, because if it's not written, it's not real and it's not followed. So the time that we take to have that and discuss it, to evaluate its effectiveness, and then go backwards and then make any adjustments that need to be made, that's where we will see forward momentum. So to me, it's completely, and I would agree, I actually agreed with everyone as you guys were talking, but it's a process discussion. That's where we have to communicate. If we don't communicate, nothing will get better.
So John, that's certainly, we want that as an agenda item for the next meeting to discuss the input that we received from Connie this evening. Connie, thank you for everything that you shared with us tonight. But we're determined to make the process more efficient and more fair and more simple.
Can we go back to school on this and maybe have someone draw up a proposal and then send it to all of us and have us try to fill it out?
If you go back about 5 years, Paula was the one that redid the whole Excel spreadsheet, and she had examples, graphic examples of a typical site plan
Should we,
with a proposed addition, whatever. And she showed how the spreadsheet worked, and that's how it was developed. So that it was an interactive type of thing that almost anybody could do.
But where did it go?
I don't know. I
would always hate to say almost anybody
Any-
could do.
Anybody with a computer.
Really, I would, nothing, no offense, Bob, but
If you don't have a computer, then you gotta hire somebody.
Can we not discuss this tonight? Just set it up for when we are gonna discuss it. And we're not gonna resolve anything tonight.
No.
So let's put everything on the table at the next meeting when we are gonna discuss it.
Sometimes a little emotion's a real.
Well, I think that it's, so I think that you wanna know the questions that are gonna be, you know.
But I think the answers are there.
Oh, they're
The answers
there.
are somewhere.
They'll reveal
downstairs.
themselves.
Can we discuss this next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. It's on, and it'll all come out, we'll have that discussion. Connie, would love it if you were available for that. Hopefully we can solve the technical issue, but at this point, we made a giant leap forward with you being with us this evening, and I appreciate it.
Can I add one thing? Paula may have a copy while it's up that we need. If you could reach out to
You
Paula.
know what, we have it all.
Oh, we do have.
Yeah, it's in the office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the graphic presentation, all of that, that's it's easily available. I have the PDFs of it also.
Okay.
I think the nutrient allocation plan is.
Okay, anything else in open discussion, anyone?
No,
Okay, we're gonna move into, well, there's nothing for an executive session, is there tonight, John? Okay,
No, there's not.
make a motion to adjourn.
adjourn,
Third, fourth, fifth.
adjourn.
Ed,
Adjourn.
Ed got a motion on the record. All those in favor to adjourn?
Adjourn.
Is everyone in favor of adjourning?
Adjourn.
Yeah, this was looking. Vera voted against adjournment.
Welcome, Mary Kay. I know.
There, stand. Here, thank you.
John, thank you. Connie, thank you.